Hey, what's up, yo? This is Noka2 coming at you again with another Comic Haul video. I have been steadily trying to get my office cleared of some of these books so I can file them away, bagging and boarding them. Like I've mentioned in previous videos, these comics are purchases that I've made within the last 3 to 4 months. So I thought I'd start off telling kind of a funny story, at least funny to me. So I went to a comic auction, a live comic auction that I found through Craigslist. So this auction was listed, and then once you clicked on it, to the link, it gave you some information, and you went to a live auction house website, and they had this auction at this community center at a small town about 3 hours away from me. So I'd never been to a live collectibles auction before, and so I went on the first day and I went on the last day. I couldn't go on the second day, but I had a birthday party for my son and I couldn't make it there. So on the first day, they sold mainly novelty items, some action figures, magazines, and they sold comic books in this bulk, weird fashion. The auctioneers had never really done collectibles before. I mean, they had no clue what they were doing. And what they had done was they had taken comic book tops from short boxes, and they just filled them with a stack of comics from independent publishers, or comics that really they just had a lot of, like X-Men #1. They had some independents like John Sable and Boris the Bear, things that no one, that really aren't highly sought after. And they had them in these box tops. But then I think they strategically threw in a few key books that they had left over and inserting one of the tops, and you had to buy the whole top in order to get that one or two book. So traveling across Ohio, I've spoken to some of the shop owners, and I told them about this auction that I went to and the story behind it, and they said, yeah, they had heard this story before, but they didn't know if it was true. The auctioneer, I talked to some of the people from the auction house, and they said, oh yeah, this is totally true. They told me the story where this couple had bought a couple of trailers and they needed it for the metal. I don't know what you use trailer metal for, but apparently they needed the metal. And when he opened the trailers up, they found that they were loaded with comic boxes. I mean, it just had tons and tons of boxes, long boxes of comics, as well as other collectibles like baseball cards and toys. And apparently the original owner of these trailers was a collector as well as a comic shop owner. And when he passed away, these just got left to be sold. No one really knew what was in the trailers when they sold them. So the couple started listing a long box on Craigslist for $50. And the auction house was trying to expand their, range of what they sold, and someone in their one of their employees knew a little bit about comics, and so they took a chance and bought a box, and it had Silver Age and some valuable Bronze Age comics. And so they went to this couple, and they, kind of got the story, and they said, how about if we do a little bit better for you than $50 a box? So they bought the entire allotment and they sold the baseball cards. And they said the baseball cards were like they made a crazy amount of money because they had like rookie Mickey Mantle in it, and it wasn't in near mint condition or anything, but they still got some money on it. And even with the comics, they had some of them were CGC graded. They had a Batman #3 that was like a 1.5. The entire cover wasn't even there. I'm not even. Obviously CGC figured out that it was Batman #3, and that sold for upwards of $4,000. So, they had a lot of comics there, and some of them were, good deals, and some of them were just way, in my opinion, way overpriced for what the market says they should go for, particularly in the grade that they had. So, on the first day I got there a little late, I really didn't know, I'd never really been to a collectible auction before. They take your information, you have to leave a credit card that they can charge if you win an auction so that you don't default in payment. And, again, the first day was mostly collectibles. And so I didn't get a chance to really go through the items they had because I got there only minutes before, maybe 10, 15 minutes before they actually started the auction. So there was this clear tote. It was probably about 2.5, maybe 3-gallon tote that was clear. And I did see the top of it, but I didn't really go through it completely. But what I did see on top was these two books here that were clearly in there, which is Blip #1. They had quite a few issues of Blip in the series in this tote. I didn't really know that they weren't in near mint condition. And the only other thing that I knew that was in the box was this, and that was Star Wars Return of the Jedi, a complete sealed box of trading cards. And I don't really know about trading cards. I don't, collect them. But, I figured it'd be worth some money if I could sell it. And this lists on eBay for about $50. I don't know if it actually sells for that, but there was only a couple of listings for sealed boxes, and they were all asking for about $50. So I don't know if they really sell for that. But that's the only thing I knew that was in the tote when I started bidding on it. Now, this comic here, this magazine is the first video game magazine published by Marvel in 1983, as you see. And on the cover here is Matthew Laborto, who is a kid star from Little House on the Prairie, playing the Tron video game. I played this game quite a bit, too. This copy is in probably VG, and this is probably in G+, because there's spine ticks on it, but on the back there's some water staining. And so a lot of the stuff in this tote was just garbage, literally garbage, because there was a lot of stuff that was wet. They had a full box of Cabbage Patch trading cards in there, but they were wet, and so they were damaged. They smelled. The gum was in them, so the cards had stuck together. They were really worthless, so I just threw them away along with a bunch of other trading cards that were in there. Dune. They did have later, after I won, this sealed box of Cosmic cards by DC. I don't even remember this trading card set. Inaugural edition, number 2004, 97, 450. And so this was in there. And then they had a notebook, a 3-inch notebook binder that also had sleeves in it. And they had a bunch of these cards in there. I'm assuming is the entire set. And they had multiple copies of cards in there. And they were in good shape, too. They were in near mint condition. And everything else was just garbage, and I threw it all away, including the tote. It was just crazy. I didn't even take it into my house because it smelled kind of funny, and it was because of the trading cards in the bottom. But after the auction, and there were probably maybe 30 people at this auction, and most of them were dealers. There were only probably maybe 5 of us, because they would have breaks between different portions of the auction, and we kind of talk, and most of the people were dealers from across the country, actually. There was this one guy that was buying long boxes of comics, and he was mailing them to his store in Alabama. And then there were guys that sold at flea markets, and they went to local cons, and they sold at local comic conventions. But for the most part, there weren't that many collectors. The only person that was bidding on this tote was another guy, and after the auction, he came up to me and asked me, he asked me, do you mind if I asked you what were you bidding on in that tote? And I told him, nothing really in particular. I mean, the only thing I really wanted was this here. And, I knew that it had this in there. I didn't know how much that was worth. But I didn't think the tote was worth what I paid for. And I just wasn't going to lose my very first auction. And so he kind of rolled his eyes and, he said, oh, yeah. And so he goes, what about the Magic cards in there? Are you interested in those? I was like, I didn't even know there were Magic cards in there. Magic the Gathering. And I said, no, not really. I don't know anything about these cards. I don't play it. And then I asked him why. He goes, well, I'd be interested in buying them from you if you'd like, if you want to sell them. And I said, well, I don't really know anything about them. So, I couldn't tell you what a value would be. I know, trading cards can have some value. And so he goes, well, how about if I make you an offer of $40? And I looked at him and I said, nah, that's okay. I didn't even know how many they were that were in the box. I said, nah, that's okay. I'll take my chance. I'll go home and look them up. And so then he goes, okay, well, I tell you what, why don't you make me an offer? And so I said, okay, how about $150? There was nothing in this tote that I really wanted except for, really this magazine. And in this condition, it's probably worth $2 or $3. But again, it was just the fun of doing the auction. And, the trading cards might be worth something. And so, he hemmed and hawed, and he goes, well, to be honest, there's really only one card in there I really want, and it's probably worth about $80. And so I said, well, if you're being honest, then why didn't you offer me $80 to begin with? And so he didn't say anything. I said, well, my offer is $150. If you want them, you can have them for $150. If not, I'll take my chances. So he walked away. So, when I got home, I looked through those cards. There were really probably about 500 cards in there of Magic cards. And, I learned the terminology that they were mint in never been played condition. And so, there was nothing, I learned that, there was not the ultimate value card, the Black Lotus that's real rare. There was none of the top 10 most expensive Magic cards. But I did find the card that he was referring to that was worth $80. It was called the Wheel of Fortune. And once I started looking online and seeing what they sold for, I called a local shop in town. There's two stores in town that does Magic the Gathering tournaments and sell cards. And they gave me a resource that you go online and you can plug in the cards, and they would tell you what their resale value is to a store. And so after all said and done, what I had determined would be the value was about $300 to $350 if I sold them on eBay, and that's before any fees. And then you have the hassle of listing them, taking photos of it. Postage would be minimal, but you would probably have to buy a bunch of top loaders to mail them in little cardboard boxes so they wouldn't get damaged. And so I took them to the store. He started going through them and pricing them. Some of them I was dead on the money. Some of them I wasn't, because there's different borders that changes the real value of the card. And so once we got up to about $125, I told him, there was still probably a good 100 cards to go. we'd already went through the ones that he thought were probably going to be valuable. I said, look, I tell you what. Why don't you give me $150? I told him the story. I said I was willing to sell them for $150 at the auction. And if you give me $150, you can have them all, and we'll call it even. I'm sure it's probably worth a little bit more, but you got to make money. I'm trying to support the local businesses, and I could care less about the cards. It was just going to the auction that was fun. He gave me $150, and we were done. And and I got all this stuff for free. I got a few other books that I'll show later as I get them bagged and boarded. But I thought that was a funny story about going to my first auction. The auction was, they really didn't know what they were doing. They had, and people, I can understand why people get caught up in the frenzy of bidding and why some of these books went for a lot more money than they should have, particularly in their condition, because I bought quite a few books that were really not worth what I paid for them. But, I had fun, and I guess that's what it's about. But they sold one Millennium Falcon, original Millennium Falcon, that was loose. It didn't even have all the parts. And it was dirty. I mean, it was dirty. It looked like it was burnt orange instead of white. The decals weren't even all on there. And it was funny is that the cockpit that covers the toy where Han Solo would sit in was broke. So the top of it, in the original toy, you could open it up, put your figure in there, and then close it back up. Well, that little canopy was broke, but the canopy was there. And some guy paid $200 for it. I mean, there's no way. That probably is not worth $1, to be honest. But he paid $200 for it. And then, there is no way that's worth $200, particularly in that condition. And then later on in the sale, some guy bought some other nonsense toy. And, in the Millennium Falcon, it was missing the satellite dish. So the satellite dish would come off on the toy, and it'd pop on. And then there was another sale of something else, and they had put the satellite dish in that box of toys, and the other guy got it. And me and another dude that was collecting, that were collectors and not dealers, was laughing at that point because we remember seeing that. But you're not allowed to move stuff from one box to the other, even if you're trying to help them out. And so some guy walked off with the satellite dish that didn't belong to anything, and the guy that had a Millennium Falcon didn't have a satellite dish, which I just thought was hilarious. But it was a fun experience. I had a good time. I went back on the third day and bought quite a few books, overpaid for a lot of it, but it was all good fun. So, so I thought I'd share that story. I thought it was kind of funny about how I ended up getting these books. So the next books I want to show you, I got at a local comic shop about an hour and a half away from me. They had some dollar books. I went there for the first time and got Magic #1, #2, and #3. They didn't have #4. I think this book, it's not, these books aren't really worth much. But it was one of the first miniseries that Marvel had done. Wolverine, Contest of Champions was the first one. They started with 3 issues. Then they did Wolverine and Hercules. They were like 4 issues, and then they started producing a few more. Magic was one of them. The story is not bad. I have the original series, and I did find issue 4 at another store later for $1. That's somewhere in my office, but to complete the set. So I have I think I have 3 complete sets of Magic. So I bought that. About maybe a mile away from my son, where he goes to school, before we have to pick him up. They don't have buses there, and for his school, and so the parents have to line up and pick their kids up. And sometimes if I get there a little early, I'll swing into Walgreens, because Walgreens sells exclusive action figures. And I got the Fantastic Four line with Mr. Fantastic, Thing, Invisible Woman, and the Human Torch, and one of them came with Herbie. And Medusa was in that line, considered part of the Fantastic Four. And they were all pretty good figures too, from the Marvel Legends series. And I knew those were coming out, but I did not know this particular figure was coming out. And I got it. It's a great looking figure. It's Magic in her Hoochie Mama Dominatrix costume. I think it's a pretty good rendition of her. And the Walgreens exclusives, they're like once they're issued, they're gone quick. I remember I made a mistake of going in one time and seeing the white Boba Fett, and they had a number of them there. There were like maybe 5 or 6 of them there, and you know, I can't remember if I was coming back from the gym or something, and you know, I only had my gym card, my driver's license, and I think maybe I had $15 on me. So I was like, you know, I'll come back and get it, and because they had 5 or 6 there. I went back the next day. I made a mistake of not going back that same day. I went back the next day, and some dude bought all of them because, you know, I asked the lady, where'd the Boba Fetts go? And she goes, oh, somebody came in and bought all of them. There's like 5 or 6 of them. And so now when I go in, if I see a figure there that's an exclusive that I want, I buy it right away because they do go away quick. And I do have quite a few action figures. Actually, let me pause this video. Yeah, let me show you here. So this is my home office here. These are the books that I just showed in the last few videos. These are comics that I have yet to catalog and show yet. These are all old books. This is my kind of a makeshift desk that I do for my bags and boards of my Mylars. And here's like one of my boxes of full backs I got from E. Gerber. Let's see, some more comics. That's my son. I did show him the first 3 videos, and he thinks they're crazy. He likes them. Here's some more of those comics. That's from the auction. These are my new books that I get. I haven't bagged and boarded them in Mylars yet. This here is some of my action figures. These are one that I displayed, and then I started losing. I didn't have enough space. Those are statues up there. There's a big fat head. And this is my toy closet. This is probably a third of the figures that I have. The rest of them are filed away. Or not filed away. They're in boxes in the back of my house. And these go too deep, you know, so I used to display them, but then I ran out of room, and then I started, you know, when the action figures first came out, these Marvel lines, you know, they made like 4 or 5 of them, 6 of them, and then that was it. But then they did well, I think, in their sales, that they just started making tons of action figures, and so stopped having enough room, and so then I just started, you know, cataloging them in the back with Star Wars, and out there is all of the Return of the Jedi and Star Wars Force, Phantom Menace, Star Wars figures. So I do collect quite a bit of action figures too. My son's always trying to pilfer them. He just recently pilfered my DC figures where you build Clayface, and he go get Clayface. Let's show it. And he took the Clayface. He's going to show Clayface. I guess he wants to be involved in the video. It's kind of an awesome thing. It's pretty big too if you when you build it, but he took it and he won't give it back.
I would never give it back.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you.
Anyway, sorry about that intermission, but anyway, here's some more comics. So I went to another, actually at the same store. I did pick up these books here, Long Shot. I think he's an undervalued series. The series itself doesn't go for very much. But when I see him in high grade, I try to pick him up. This is number 1, number 2. They didn't have number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. I think number 5, or it might be number 3 is why it's missing, is his first appearance of Spiral and Mojo's in one of these, his first, or I think Mojo's a woman, her first appearance. And so I think these books are, you know, they're not very valuable yet, but I think they do have some room to increase in value. And these 4 were newsstands, obviously, in this one direct. I think I have maybe, I want to say I have probably 3 complete copies of the series. I went to another shop that did not have a lot of books there that I wanted. It was my first time there, but they did have some of their newer books still up on display. And at the time when I got this book, it was cover price. It was still on display in their new books. Venom was on issue number 5. And all their back issues, you know, you go through it, key books had already been pilfered out. And so I was looking through some of their newer books because it was clear they weren't selling like all of their books every month. And this book was like, you know how special comic shops will have the titles, you know, moving forward, 1 in the back, 2, 3, 4, and the current issue on top. And so I was just, you know, randomly looking through their Venoms, and I saw this book was still there. I have several copies of this book when it first came out, and the cover is awesome, right? Venom, you know, getting ready to swallow Miles Morales there. It is the first appearance of Null, if you didn't know that already. And this book has 1 spine tick there, if you can see it. In this condition, let's say it's VF, very fine. I mean, it still goes for 20 bucks. So I thought, you know, cover price, I'll pick that up. Now, I went to another sale, and it was kind of interesting. I've actually never seen this tactic before, but the guy was selling dollar books, and if you bought so many books, he let you pick from a box and pay $5 for 1 comic. So you couldn't buy, like, let's say if you bought 50 comics, you got to buy 1 book out of this box that he thought was worth more, and you get 1 comic for $5. But if you bought 100 comics, it didn't mean you could come back to this box and buy 2. You got 1. And so I picked this comic out because it was in high grade. Fantastic Four, number 115. There's nothing really significant about it, but it is in pretty high grade, except for this 1 corner bend here, crease in the corner. But otherwise, it's intact. The staples are tight. Great comic, Silver Age. It is the last 15 cent of Fantastic Four. In this condition, this book is probably worth 20 bucks. So for $5, I thought that was worth buying. He did have a few other dollar books that I thought were worth getting. He had this Marvel Tales reprint, Spider-Man 100. It's in pretty high grade, and I thought for $1 I'd pick it up. I also found this there, Adventure Comics 440, retelling of the Spectra Origin Jim Aparo cover. You know, for $1. You know, it's not in mint shape, but I thought that was a good book to have for $1. It was otherwise pretty nice. And then I also picked this book up for $1. There's nothing really significant about it. It is in high grade, near mint, Dark Hawk, number 37, and it had Venom on the cover, so I thought I'd pick it up for $1. These last books I'm going to show you, I got at a sale at a local comic shop about an hour away. I went to it one time before. It was the first time I went there. I did pick up a few books that I'll show later when I find them. The first time I was there, I talked to the guy, and then afterwards, he was saying since it was my first time visiting, he wanted me to show me his warehouse in the back. So he showed me the warehouse. He had tons of books. He says there's probably 40,000 comics back there. And once a year, he has a sale where his books are $1. And so, you know, he only has it once a year because he shares the space in the back with another business there, so he doesn't let people rummage through because not everything in the store warehouse is his. So once a year, he kind of opens it up for a sale. And I went to the sale. I'm pretty sure Mercenot was there before me because he talks about the sale, and I did not have the luck that he had. But I did find a couple of books there, and the ones that I'm going to show now are I don't know if they were the best books I found in the sale, but they were some nice books. And that was, I found Flash 207, Michael Turner covers. He did a cover run from 207 to 211. It was 207, 209, 210, and then 211. I think they are all great covers by Michael Turner. And anytime I see them in high grade, I pick them up. Now, individually, they're not really worth a lot of money. But if you sell them as a set, you can easily get $15 for a set of 4. But if you were lucky enough to have the whole set, you could easily get $20-25. So I had previously gone to another sale, and I'd found 207, and I did find the 208 there, and another copy of 210, which I think is great with the Rogues Gallery and Flash, and then 211. So those were, again, anytime I see them, I pick those books up for $1 a piece. One day, if I sell my comics, I'm sure I'll list those as a set. So there you have it. Another comic haul in the books, and hope you enjoyed it. I'm enjoying doing these videos. I predict that very soon my son and I will make some kind of a video with him as the star as he starts his YouTube career. So with that, enough said. Have a great day. Peace.